Hi, everyone. Welcome to Confidently Be You. My name is Jennifer Shlomovich, and I am a confidence coach who specializes in helping women who are recovering people pleasers stand in their power so they can have fulfilling careers and relationships. Today, I'm going to discuss tips for having satisfying relationships with my special guest, Deborah Kat. Deborah helps others create and reignite healthy, empowered, passionate relationships. She has a background as a Tantra educator and professional dominatrix. She has years of experience and skills that can help you find solutions to unique challenges in your relationships. Deborah, welcome.
Ah, Jennifer, thank you so much. I have been looking forward to our time together. Thank you so much for having me.
I've been looking forward to. We met about maybe a few weeks ago, I think it was now. And I remember we had such a great conversation. And so I'm really excited to have you here. You have a very unique background, and I think you have a lot that can help my listeners. So thanks for coming on.
My pleasure.
So, my first question that I ask everybody is, what inspired you to do what you do?
Gosh. So it's just something that keeps coming around, right? This idea of what makes a satisfying relationship. And I grew up in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I was really lucky to get to see a variety of different kinds of relationships. And what I got to really witness is how each of these relationships were a little different. So, for instance, I saw, your classic traditional relationships. I saw same-sex relationships. I saw relationships that were extraordinary in that they didn't conform. And what I really got to see was how a loving, satisfying relationship could happen, right? And so, fast forward, I tried very hard to fit into the mold of, what it is to have a successful relationship and what it might look like, so all of the different, so having the right house and having the right job and having the right boyfriend or partner. And it just, honestly, I wasn't happy. I wasn't satisfied. There was a part of me that was looking for something a little bit different. And so I ended up in a Tantra workshop. Um, and there was this place where it was like they started talking about how to balance the masculine and the feminine. And at first I was like, I'm not buying it. But what happened was I really got to look at what it was that I was bringing to the table and all of my resentments, all of my discomfort, all of the places where I didn't have a whole lot of confidence and where I was projecting on others. And so I really got to experience what it was like to be held as perfect, if for no other, without any other word. Basically, that idea that who I was, was absolutely welcome. And that meant all of my crazy, if you will, like all of the places where I felt too much or inadequate or over the top, or all of those different places. Uh, I was actually seen and held and able to actually feel what it felt like to be appreciated and have approval in all of those spots for myself and, coming from the outside. And so what I learned from that was to have my own self-approval, but also to bring that to the relationships around me. And so what I really found was that, like, the most important thing in a relationship is that it work for the two people within it. And it doesn't really, it doesn't matter what it looks like for the outside, because as long as it's working for the people within it, and, of course, it is, generative. That's really what I consider to be successful and satisfying, is for the people inside to be able to make that choice and that judgment for themselves.
Wow. Yeah, that's a very empowered place to be when you're able to just accept yourself for who you are and bring in the relationships that fulfill that part of you, that authentic part of you. I think a lot of unhappiness and discontent happens when we start shoulding ourselves and we
Ugh.
feel like, oh, I should be doing this, or why do I like this person when I should be liking that person? Or, for example, too, like there's a lot of pressure on women to be married and have children. And and that's a great path, but if it's not your path, that's okay too. Being married and having children doesn't define you as a person, but there's so much of that generational expectation, those like old paradigms, these expectations. And so there are women who force themselves to be married and force themselves to have children because they think that's what is expected of them. And then they're not happy because they went down the path that wasn't really right for them. Or maybe eventually they do find a way to be happy with their kids and everything like that. But we where I'm rambling and all of this is again with the shoulding, right? It's
Oh,
putting that I should be, trying to force yourself into something instead of doing what feels right to you.
absolutely. It's funny. I was working with one of the coaches that I work with, and we were actually doing an interview on Clubhouse, and he talked about the idea of when you start with the shoulding, um, try and substitute the word wanting, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like when you start, when I, because I'm starting to put this into practice. It's like when I start hearing myself with the oh, I should do this, and then I kind of check in of like, do I want to do this? And then if I've got kind of a wobble on it, then I'll kind of back up a moment and start looking at like, well, why do I feel like I should? Like, is
Mm-hmm.
there something I value underneath the should, right? Because I think that's the thing that we all, I don't know if struggle is the right word for it, but like where we have a value, like for instance, somebody who like I value and love children, and but it's not my path to have them. But
Mm-hmm.
I can value and love children. I have several children in my life, and I serve the greater good by loving those children and being part of their lives and not necessarily having my own. So I can satisfy the value of wanting to nurture and wanting to hold and help and, help create amazing, amazing people of the future
Yeah.
without having to, go a route that is not in my best interest and not in the best interest of those around me. And I think it's a really important. I have a lot of thoughts about this particular subject, so I'm
Yeah,
just going
please
to
share.
put a few things out there. It's like, we can love and nurture, and it can look so many different ways. It's like you can be the amazing fun aunt who comes in and takes the kids and holds them and gives the parents a break, right? And that service in and of itself is
Mm-hmm.
huge,
Absolutely.
right? I can be the fun, the fun aunt that shows up for the PTA meetings when my friends aren't up for it. Like I can step in those ways and serve in the way that is, that is my highest and best version, right? Like I can totally show up, for 6 hours and hold that space, but I'm not necessarily the best I'm not going to be the best at doing it 24/7. And I think that goes, that's how to create satisfying relationships in general. Is it's like starting to know, how can I show up in the highest and best, and what is most of service for that, right? So it is not of service for me to show up tired and grumpy and in the shooting space, right? Now, sometimes sometimes again those values come, there's something that we value that we're wanting out of that place of should. Does that make sense? Is that landing for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Like there's there's a tied value to the shoulding, but it may not be in the packaging that you're envisioning or trying to force. It could be in a different package.
Exactly. Exactly. I love that. And that's really, I think a lot about that with relationships. In that, we are often trained to look for the packaging. You know, is he this tall? Is he, does he have, the right car, the right house, the right, whatever the packaging is. But then when we find somebody who's got all the right packaging and clicks off all the right books or boxes, it's like being in their presence may not actually feel good to us, right? That might not be what is good for our systems, what is good for, like one of the things I like to say with my clients is it's not so much about what he does, but how you feel there.
Mm-hmm.
And, oftentimes we can be surprised with who actually makes us feel good, who makes us feel safe, who makes us feel, cherished and valued. And, sometimes we'll discount that person because there's not that fiery chemistry, right? Well, fiery chemistry is a beautiful thing. And it's great for sex, it's great for procreation, it's not always great for long-term relationships.
Yeah, that's a very good point. There's a few things I want to touch on because you touched on a lot of great things. First of all, yeah, I when I went through my coach training, I learned about shoulds versus wants and the fear-based values versus conscious-based values, which the fear-based values are the shoulds and the conscious-based values are the wants. And some of those fear-based values we get from our upbringing, like our parents imprinting their expectations on us. So we start shoulding ourselves because of the expectations of our family and for our guardians, whoever was, a part of our lives from a very young age. That's where that starts to form.
Mm-hmm.
And it can be scary being honest when you start talking to people about things that are different from what they expect from you or what's the norm, which is a big part of the work that I do. Is we're not happy if we're trying to live someone else's version of life or trying to, be, someone who's a recovering people pleaser. I shoulded myself for a long time, and it wasn't a healthy thing. It brought me a lot of pain until I couldn't take it anymore. And so, yeah, it is so important to be clear with yourself with what it is you really want, and then what are the definitions for those values, because a couple can share same values but then have different definitions and expectations within those values. And then what you were saying, about the fire and the passion, it is great, but it's not a sustainable thing. And it's having a healthy, reasonable expectation on a relationship, especially when you live with someone. You're going to experience the highs, the lows, and all the moods in between.
Absolutely.
And so it's not always going to be some romantic getaway 24/7. Um, and and I think too, a big part of that is the communication piece. Like sometimes we're afraid to communicate something that is so important to communicate because we're afraid of how the person's going to react, or we get upset because someone's not anticipating our needs, or nobody's a mind reader. And so our partners might think everything's okay and that there's nothing wrong in any aspect of the relationship, and then either you say something so you can clear it up, or if you don't say anything, it builds and builds and builds and builds, and then all of a sudden the littlest thing happens and it's like this huge explosion and the other person's confused.
Right. I mean, and it is so devastating to the partner who feels like they've been the good partner, that they've been
Right.
doing what they think, is the right thing for their partner, and they're not getting any feedback any differently. When I work with clients, I've got three main pillars, and communication is a huge one. So communication is a big one. Empowerment and, the confidence that you talk about is another one. And then skills. It's like really having the skills around relationship and around, passion and sexuality. And, part of it's like you can't really separate those three out because they go together, but like there is nothing, I sit with clients all the time where it's like, they've been together 7 years. 7 years seems to be the thing right now. I don't know if this happens for you, but I noticed that I've got patterns with my clients, and right now
Isn't
the
that called
pattern.
the 7 year itch? Isn't there like a term for that? I've heard like the 7 year itch where
Well,
people get
there
anxious
is
for
a
a
7 year
change.
itch, but it seems like, that seems to be what's showing up right now is people are hitting the 7 year itch, if you will, or whatever point it is, and they're finally getting honest with their partners. And men are telling women, I've never had women are telling men, I've never had an orgasm, you know, uh, and men are telling women, I don't feel as, we're not having the kind of sex that I want to have. I want to be a little bit more adventurous. I mean, I
Mhm.
guess they're both pretty much saying that to each other is we're not doing what we're doing isn't working, right?
Right,
So the
right.
bottom line is what we're doing isn't working. And so then it's like, oh, okay, well, what can we do to actually come back together again? Right. And a big part of that is, each party really finding their no so that they can find their yes. And each party getting clearer on, the places where they are willing to experiment, where they're willing to just say, hey, let's try it. This may not necessarily be what I want to do every Saturday, but like, let's try it. And, really exploring how can I have fun and be connected to my partner without losing myself. And, the people pleasing is a big part of, the sort of things that we unwind when I work with clients around relationship, because there is that desire for connection, but that desire for connection doesn't need to come at the cost of your own, you know self-worth or your own pleasure or your own, what I often see is one partner will be doing a lot and then they don't feel like they have the time, um, to be receiving or to be, to just be in the being, if you will.
Those are all very good points. Yeah, I think yeah, and it all goes down to what you were, communication. No one's a mind reader. And of course it can be really uncomfortable to bring up these things, especially if, you've been in a relationship for about 7 years and then all of a sudden you finally get to that place where you're like, I have to say something about this. And so yeah, it can be scary to hear something, to be on the receiving end of the communication as well as the one doing the communication, but I think it's also how you do it, right? And
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's a big part of the how. But I also want to just say that, that thing that we did for the first 4 years was hot. And then something changed, right? And the truth is that, that is that's the place where I find most of the um challenge comes around is it's like, we came together at, let's say, our early 30s. We're now in our late 40s. And um, it's not so much that our values changed, but it's like the way that we just grew in different ways, or we grew and we didn't update the plan.
yeah, and that's, I mean, well, just think about it. When we were younger, when we were kids, we went through different phases in terms of toys we liked, TV shows, and then as we got older, maybe music preferences change and other preferences, and so it kind of goes to the same thing where your preferences with being intimate with your partner can change, and just other things within the relationship can change as we grow and evolve, as the two people involved grow and evolve. There's going to be changes that are going to take place, and that's my experience has been, when a change happens, you can either grow together with it or grow apart from it. And so that's when the changes start to make things a little bit wobbly, because then you hit that fork in the road of, what does this mean for the relationship? Where is it going?
Right. And I think it's perfectly, the third option that we don't always look at so much is, that's a very like, it either we go together or we go apart. And there's sort of another middle place where it's like, we actually bless the places where we're not together, right? We bless the places that just don't quite work for us. For instance, my partner we've been together for 22 years. He's been an
Nice.
Aikidoist, martial artist, and that is his path. That is his, path of training. That is his path of connection. It's his path. And mine is more, where I want to put my time and my energy is the Tantra path. And
Mm-hmm.
so while these paths aren't exactly the same, they have some similarities, and there are places where we can come together. And then there's places where it's just like, yeah, that's not my path. And I am so excited that you found your path. I mention this because one of the things that I suggest to my clients, and I do in my own relationship, is when I start feeling disconnected from my partner, I look for the place where I can see him in his highest and best. And
I love that.
and when he is on the Aikido mat,
Mhm.
he is in his version of bliss. So I can go, I can be feeling really crunchy about him, and then I go see him train, and I'm like, oh yes, this is, it's like I get to see that part of him that is so yummy. And for him it's the same, although, um when we start feeling disconnected, like he'll start asking for more time walking together, more time dancing together, more time moving together, because that's when I'm at my highest and best. um I get crunchy in front of the computer sitting all day. I'm a lot happier when I'm out and about and moving. So really looking for that place where it's like, oh, how can I remember? How can I really, see my partner again in that high space?
There's a lot of value in what you just shared there. And I love what you said about blessing the places. What did you say, that you're not connected? Was that the
Blessing the places where you're just not on the same path.
Yes, I love that. And because I think there's a lot of people, some people who I've worked with, and just some of my own earlier experiences, is that I became aware of, is like expectations, right? We have
Mhm.
expectations on how a person's going to respond to something in any part of the relationship, or you start off a certain way and then you just change and evolve, and it can lead to like a judgment, and and looking, being annoyed and frustrated with somebody because they're different now. They're all of a sudden,
Mhm.
they're not who they used to be. And and I like what you said about blessing that, because and talking about and finding, because I guess where I'm getting at is, we're not always going to connect 100% with everything. And look, I wouldn't want to be with someone who's exactly like me anyway. So,
Right.
but sometimes we feel like, oh, this person's handling something differently. than me. Or, for example, stress responses. My husband and I have a different stress response for things. So, like, certain things that'll annoy and bother one person may not necessarily annoy and bother the other person. And then it can be into the, well, why are you overreacting over that? And then it ends on a little flip flop. And and so it's about understanding why something's important to somebody, like,
Hmm.
finding that common ground. For me, and I've shared this before on this channel, my first marriage was very challenging. It was very toxic, and I was a people pleaser, and I just gave in all the time.
Hmm.
And it got to the point where I just couldn't take that anymore. I kind of like tolerated and tolerated and tolerated and tolerated. And then when I got therapy and worked on myself, um, I started to speak up, and that
Hmm.
didn't go over very well. And
Right.
so, I was told my therapist turned me into a bitch, and things like that. And that's when I realized this was an unhealthy situation, which led to a very crazy divorce experience, which the dust has settled, and things are better. I have a teenage son. We co-parent. Things are a much healthier space, but it took a lot from, because I used to be one way, and I was changing who I was and how I responded to things. And now I've since remarried. And now from that situation, I learned it's very important to communicate and not tolerate
Oh,
things.
absolutely. Absolutely. Tolerating, we're taught to tolerate. We really are. We're taught to tolerate. We're taught to tolerate things from from work, from our families, from there are all of these places where we're expected to tolerate. And when we don't tolerate, um two things, there's two ways of sort of pushing back against the toleration. One is to take it until we actually explode, which in some ways actually kind of feels good, because like it's an incredible rush of power,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's like that spring that gets squashed down and then all of a sudden it pushes out, and there's a lot of power there. And there's also can be a bit of wreckage. And
Yes.
sometimes that's the only, sometimes that's the way a person needs to be until they can do something else, right? But then the other part of tolerating is noticing, like, oh, this isn't exactly where I want to be. And then, but being real with, this is where I'm at, right? So it's like, here I am. I have, this, things aren't the way. I mean, the first step is actually noticing that you're not comfortable, that you don't actually want what you've got going on, right?
Yeah.
And, for some of us, that takes a while because we've been so accommodating for so long. Sometimes, and I'm not sure how this works for you, but like for me, um, I will actually, when I've got myself into a situation where I'm taking on more, this is usually how I do the people pleasing, tolerating thing, is I have just said yes and taken on way more than I can actually do.
Mm-hmm.
I get an immediate headache. And I'm like, oh, I've got a headache. This isn't my normal thing. Um, and then I have to step back a couple places and be like, okay, well, where did I, what have I got? What am I taking on that is too much, or that's not what I want to be doing? Like I have the physical reaction of like, oh, you're out of your box, you're out of integrity, you're out of alignment, however you want to think about that. Like that headache, that physical sensation is an indication that I need to do something a little different, right? And
Mm-hmm.
so, I've learned that over the years. But that's actually one of the ways in which I can key in. And, not everybody does a headache, but like oftentimes, um, you know, somebody won't sleep so well, or they, there's lots of little physical things that people will often sort of write off. But really starting to notice what's going on with your body is a big indication of, where you are in your world, in your life.
That's a very good point that I'm glad you brought up. One of the things that I talk to my clients about is, when you want to make a decision for something and how to confidently make a decision about something is, what does a yes feel like in your body and what does a no feel like in your body? Because you can
Oh,
have,
I love that. That's so good.
because our body gives us cues on things. So if you're trying to make a decision and you're not sure what to choose, close your eyes and envision yourself doing it, and then close your eyes and envision yourself not doing it. And whatever that reaction is, you'll know if it's in alignment for you or not. And so to tie that in with what you were just saying, for me, I know for myself, I start to get very anxious. I get
Mm.
very anxious and I'll feel like tension in my like
Mhm.
stomach when I start to feel like I've taken on too much, or I'm starting to feel like overwhelmed. And then I will feel like this, like I'll start having like little bits of clutter and I like have trouble like staying organized. And it's kind of like this like spiral of everything when I've just been pulled in a million different directions. So yeah, as I've been doing this work with myself and since learning, helping myself with it and then helping my clients with it, our bodies give us so much information and just how we're feeling about something. And if you're feeling dread or anxiety about something, it's important to ask yourself why. It's so important to ask yourself why. Journaling was such a lifesaver, has been such a lifesaver in my life, but especially in the beginning before I started, standing up for myself and speaking my truth. And what you were saying before about truth, sometimes it's hard to admit the truth to yourself because
Mhm.
it can be very inconvenient, right?
Right? Absolutely.
The truth you thought was your truth, the life that you were living. I remember, usually you have rumblings of what the truth really is before you're ready to admit it to yourself. Like that's the hardest part. But then when I've admitted it to myself, I realize, oh, this has kind of been in the background for a while.
Right, right. And I just want to point for just a second. So in Tantra, we talk about the chakras and the chakra system. And it sounds kind of, wooey and mystical. But the beauty of the chakra system is it's actually in the body. And so when you start listening to your body, you'll notice, like you said, you have rumblings in your belly, right?
Mhm.
Well, so rumblings in the belly is often, or the belly section of the body is often about how we feel about power. Do we feel
Interesting.
right? So if the rumblings are in the belly, then the question might be like, oh, am I disempowering myself? Am I making a choice that is not an empowering choice, not a confident choice, right? So for instance, like, I was saying that I get headaches. Well, the third eye up here is about intuition. So I kind of just put this together that like, oh, I'm not even listening to my own intuition. Like this is my
Wow.
intuition saying, hey, not so fast, right? I can tell, like, if I'm let's say I'm in a heated conversation with my partner, and maybe I'll feel my chest or my heart space start to go down or start to contract. Then, I'm like, oh, I'm not receiving him. I'm not letting him love me, right? So can I actually step back, relax a little bit, open up, and allow that conversation? So, um, so yeah, I mean, the body has so much wisdom, so much wisdom. You think about it. So the first chakra is at the base of the spine, and so it makes perfect, and it's all about survival, right?
Hmm.
So it makes perfect sense that during the pandemic, the first thing that we ran out of was toilet paper. We were in total survival mode. So that makes complete sense. But like again, it's funny that this wisdom is so available to us, but again, it's not where we focus. We generally focus outward to solve the problem out here versus coming inward and checking in, like, oh, well, where is this problem? Or, is it even really a problem?
I love that you brought up the chakra system. That's something I've been paying attention to more in the past like 4 years. And I just actually am in the process of finishing up a Reiki 2 certification. So I've been really noticing the impact of energy within in our bodies. And it might sound woo-woo-y, but there's really something to all of this. And when you start learning to pay attention and harness that, and what you're talking about, the chakra, it's at the sacral chakra at the base.
Sacral chakra is at the base, yes.
Right, yeah. So I learned about that a couple years ago from someone I follow on YouTube who talks about different elements of spirituality and connections to trauma. And I realized how like there was a lot of like childhood trauma stuff that I healed through, but what I realized is there was that like residual energy that was there that I had to work through. And
Mhm.
so it is very fascinating. I kind of wouldn't mind having you come back and talk about chakras a future time if you want to come back.
Absolutely. I would totally be delighted to. I mean, I so appreciate the opportunity to talk to you. And I just noticed that it's just like there's so much to talk about. And it's more of an opening conversation.
Yeah, but that's what I like to have in my interviews is like I'll have a list of questions, but that's just kind of to get us started. And I like seeing where things go and seeing that evolution because I feel like there's so much more value when you hear two people talking about things that they're passionate about or they're sharing their personal experiences. Like I learned so much when I listen to other podcasts and YouTubers who are just talking. It's not polished, it's just people sharing their experiences. And I feel like there's so much value in that. So I'm just excited that you're here talking about all this stuff because we don't normally have an opportunity to hear people talk about this stuff or and so that's what I hope when I do share things on this channel is that there's something useful that someone will get from that with all the different people that I interview. So yeah, so I'm really excited to have you here. And yeah, I'd love to have you come back and talk about chakras because I feel like there's so much value in just understanding that because the more I've learned to understand that, it's helped me make more sense and the challenges that I've gone through because everything is energy and when you understand the energetics of your body,
Hmm.
it can help you work through some of those challenges.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, it's funny. It's like, I think the more, when you were talking about like, oh, the more I understand myself, I mean, it's so funny that it's like there's actually these parts of ourselves that, we haven't slowed down enough to listen to, we haven't given voice to. I know for myself, it's like I am definitely more apt to listen to that part of myself that has the louder voice. And, it really takes a lot of sitting and getting silent and, to allow and to listen to that more vulnerable voice, that voice that has more of the needs, um, that voice that I'm more apt to just kind of silence.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of that is because when we're growing up, we're told who we should be. And our parents, meaning well, there's religion and all the different aspects that go through a family structure that set up the family structure. And so we're growing up thinking we're supposed to fit in the boxes of our family. And we're so caught up with who we should be or think we should be that when you realize that there's a other part of you, the what you want to be or who you want to be is trying to like step through that, and that's when that conflict happens. And that's where it's important to give yourself that space. Answering questions, when journaling was so powerful for me because that was an outlet for me to start acknowledging things that were below the surface before I acknowledge them externally. And it helped me kind of clear through all the rubble. An analogy I like to use with my clients, coaching and journaling and any type of tool that allows you to externally process your inside world. It's kind of like, you have an attic or a basement and you want to turn it into a family room, but you have all these boxes from all these different moves and they're just kind of sitting there and you kind of forgot what's in there. You kind of know what's in there. And then you have to like open each box and then you have to figure out what you want to do with it. Well, our brains are the same way. Like we have this subconscious part of our brain that's running the show a lot of the time and we don't know what's going on. We just feel something and we're reacting to what we're feeling until we get aware. And then when we have that awareness, then we have that choice. Having that awareness gives us that power to choose. Instead of our emotions running us, we're able to like pause and make a more mindful decision on how we want to respond to something.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And, I just want to say something really quickly about like, a lot of the conditioning, a lot of the family structure stuff, a lot of the religion, it's all about how do we keep ourselves safe.
Yeah.
Right? It is terrifying to a parent to watch their child do things that they may, that are outside of the norm because it could be unsafe. It could be that whatever it is that child is expressing, may not be considered safe in the world. And so, parents are doing their best to like hold, and create safety for their kids. And again, the world changes very quickly.
Mm-hmm.
And just like the relationship between two people, that those individuals growing, it's like a constant need to check back in again. Like, is this actually accurate? Is this accurate information that I'm giving my partner? Is this accurate information, in terms of where we are in the world? And just really, I parents have a really freaking hard job.
Yes, it's definitely a challenge. I have a son who's, about to finish high school. And then I also have two stepsons, also one about to finish high school and another one who's in college. And being a parent is hard. And then having a blended family has its own different challenges at times. And the key to all of that is communication. A lot of communication and understanding, like, if something is pissing you off, well, what's bothering you? Why? Like, something I would love to talk with you about, I think is so important to touch on, is triggers, right? We can get triggered by various things, and our partner could do something unintentionally, just by saying something or making a joke or just anything, not with any malicious intent, but it could cause a trigger.
Right.
And what I've learned is when I get that trigger feeling, before I used to like react to it because you feel like the person's doing something to you, but they're actually not doing that. We're actually projecting our own stuff onto it. But in that moment, it feels real. And when I've learned about triggers, is one thing I've heard is, triggers are our teachers, and they've helped teach me. What I do is if something upsets me or I get triggered, I'll excuse myself and I'll say, hey, I need like 10 minutes or 30 minutes, whatever it is. And then I'll journal, because then I have that free space where I could just mentally vomit. and then I'm able to have a constructive conversation. So I feel like it's so important when we are communicating to our partners or anybody, even in the workplace. If somebody pisses you off at work, it's better. Sometimes I've done, like, I'll type an email without putting any actual emails in it that I'd accidentally send, but just having having the blank email and just rant it all out, because you're clearing that energy, that anger, that frustration. And then I feel like, from my own personal experience and experiences with clients that I've worked with, is then you can see things a little more clear. And then you can
Absolutely.
have a much more constructive response to whatever it is that triggered you.
Absolutely. And I just want to say one really quick thing around triggers, because you did such a beautiful job of talking about how to clear them, but like triggers are where we get scared, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And there's this whole sort of there's this way that triggers are being dealt with in the world right now that is a little unfortunate. In that, yes, I believe that we want to do our best to understand each other so that we're not saying things that are just like, that what I want to say is that, like, we have different worlds, we've had different experiences. And so sometimes when we come together, something that one person will find normal, another person will find threatening.
Yeah.
Or another person will find, scary, or, we don't know what each other's experiences is. So when we are triggered, then, we've hit that place of fear. We've hit something that's scary. We've hit something that feels unsafe, right?
Mhm.
And then, so it's normal that we will often push out when we feel afraid, right? When we're afraid, our attention goes in different places. Maybe we like completely check out. Maybe we get super, grounded and like, you can't move me. Sometimes our energy gets pushed out. There's different places where our energy and our attention goes when we're triggered. But, the bottom line is, yes, there is something to learn there. And some triggers are so raw for people and feel so dangerous, that it's hard to know how to move around them in some cases. And so, as you're saying, the more that we can understand our own triggers, and the more, hopefully, we'll be able to hold space for others when they are triggered,
Mhm.
right? Like, I've noticed that people, do this whole "you're triggered" thing, in a blaming sort of way. And it's like, yeah, I'm triggered. That was fucking scary. That felt like it was,
Yeah.
I was coming up against something that felt survival mode, right? I get that on your side of the fence, you're just saying something that doesn't feel at all triggering. But like the way I received it, it hit that place of survival mode. And
Mhm.
like I said, this is a huge, deeper conversation.
I know we could probably do a whole topic on triggers, but I felt like it was important to bring it up, and what you said is very important, and having that compassionate lens on, someone who is experiencing a trigger. And I thought it was just very important to bring up, because my experience is, in relationships, people are reacting to triggers at times, and it's finding a way to respond instead of react.
Absolutely.
And so
Absolutely.
and then as someone who's receiving the person, because we all accidentally trigger people, and it can happen. Right?
Some of us more often than others.
Yes, there's that too, right?
I mean, I just want to say up front, like, the only reason I know half the things I know is because I've done all the things. I've made the mistakes. And, I just realize, like, more and more, I just realize we're all trying to do the best we can.
Yeah.
Right. And, you know, hopefully we have spaces and places, be it, coaches like you, or, therapists or beautiful communities that can hold us and allow us to grow. It's like, oh, I'm doing the best I can, but that doesn't mean it's great.
Right, exactly. But it's part of that healing work. And
Mm-hmm.
and triggers for me, yes, have been very scary and overwhelming when I've experienced them, but they've also helped me pinpoint, oh, this is where I need to do some healing work. And
Absolutely.
the abandonment wound has been a very big one for me that I've had a lot of various triggers on over the years, and that's something that I've been healing. And what I've noticed is like certain things that would have used to trigger me no longer trigger me, or and I'm able to stand in my power. And part of being a people pleaser, or at least for me and like people who I've worked with, there's a big abandonment wound. You're afraid of, if you don't do things the way people expect you to do them, you're not going to be loved and have that support. and
Right.
and so
Right.
the abandonment wound has been something big that I've had a lot of triggers to heal through. And so, yeah, I feel like we could talk about a lot of things. And I definitely would love to have you come back so we could continue more of our conversation at another time. Before we wrap up, are there any other tips or anything that you would like to touch on this topic?
Yeah, I mean, we've talked about a lot, but I just want to come back to a couple of things. One of them is really the wisdom of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Another one, um, if you get into a situation where you are feeling something that needs some attention, right? We can excuse ourselves, right? And take ourselves out. The other thing that we can, and the first thought, or for me, the first place I always go is, can you be grounded in this moment? Right? Because as you mentioned, a lot of our triggers come from being in the past or consider or future thinking and future catastrophizing. So can I be present in this moment? And the first thing is, can I feel my feet on the ground? Can I take a deep breath? Can I imagine whatever it is that's got me uh heightened? Can I imagine just letting that go? Right. And being able to say, I need a moment. Like, I tell my clients, if you can't say anything else, just tell them you're going to the bathroom, because nobody's going to argue with that. Right. So you go to the bathroom, you close the door, yeah, like just take a moment. And can you actually find your breath again? Can you feel your feet on the ground? Can you feel your breath? Can you look around the room and see, oh, I see the window in front of me. I see the, picture over there. I'm safe in this moment. Right. So
Mm-hmm.
all of these things to help bring yourself present. So there's my very long answer.
No, but that's very important. Yeah, and that's a very good trick too, is to have that space. And it seems like, the root of our conversation, having a satisfying relationship, just to kind of summarize a little bit, is being honest with yourself, being honest with the person you're involved in, or multiple people, whatever your relationship situation is being honest with yourself, being honest with those who are involved, and then understanding yourself, understanding your values, understanding, are you shooting yourself somewhere? What's more authentic for you? What is it that you want? What, you could write a list. What are the shoulds in my life? What are the wants in my life?
Mm-hmm.
And then having that space of honesty and communication. And I, in my first marriage, when I was being honest and communicating, it wasn't being respected. And so for me, that's a big indicator when a relationship is no longer viable. Because if you
Mm-hmm.
can't be respected, you know, for having your differences, I feel like that, and that's a big warning sign right there, that that's when it's time to move along.
Right. Absolutely. And if a partner isn't willing, right, isn't willing at some on some level you know, to be able to see that things are not going well and that it's like they have a part in it. You
Mhm.
know, that's when it feels like, you know, there's a process that we do called the discernment process. And that's basically, is this a stay together or is this a part amicably
Mm,
experience? And it's like, you know, what you're talking about, the respect, is the respect there? Is it, you know, is there communication? Is there, you know, are parties coming together who are able to actually hold themselves enough to be in relationship? You know,
right.
because sometimes, you know, sometimes there's a situation where one person is so overpowering to the other
Yeah.
that, you know, there's no space for them. And, you know, I think that's part of what you're talking about with the respect, but just
Yeah.
really, yeah.
But that's another element to it also is yeah, they're just so overpowering that absolutely. Wow, I feel like we could talk for a really long time and it's been so great having you here and I definitely want you to come back because I would love to really dive deep on chakras, understanding them. But before we wrap up, are there any resources that you would like to share with anyone who's watching who could be that could be helpful with this?
Absolutely. Well, I'd love to invite you to come check out my website, deborahkat.com. And there are blog posts, there are resources. If you join me in the on the if you sign up for my newsletter, I've got different tips coming out every month. And of course, you know, I'm available for one-on-one and for group coaching as well. And I'm starting to come back in person, which is super exciting.
That is exciting. I will put your website link in the notes below this video as well. So if you'd like to connect with Deborah, you can easily do so. It was so great having you on here, and I definitely would love to have you back.
Absolutely. And my apologies for running over, if you will. It's like
Oh no, I
there's
feel like
so
there's
much to
so much
say.
value. I feel like we could talk for a long time. And no, I think everything you shared was very valuable. And yeah, this was great. So thanks again, Deborah, for coming on. And thank you for watching. And I'll see you soon. Bye for now.
Bye for now.